Welcome to TestingUy. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We have a special speaker today, Melody. Welcome. Melody is joining us from Taiwan, and she used to live in Bolivia for almost 10 years, and she speaks really well Spanish. Bienvenida, Melody.
Gracias.
Thank you for sharing your knowledge with the testing community. We are very excited that you are joining us today in this testing packed week. So if you are ready, please go ahead and take the virtual stage. Thank you very much for joining us and enjoy the stage. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Claudia, for the introduction. And I will share my screen right now. And well, thank you everybody for joining us here today this afternoon. I'm very excited about having this chance to be here and then having this talk to share about my experience in modern web automation testing. And this is actually my first time giving a talk, so I'm very, very thrilled. So a little bit about myself. My name is Melody Lin, and I'm currently working as the QA for a company called CDEX, which makes web automation testing tools. And we are currently located in Taiwan, and that is my email over there. So let's get started. Okay, so if you're listening to this talk, I would expect that you have some knowledge about web testing automation tools, or at least some basic knowledge about or some like experience with automation testing. And if you are a QA engineer or a web developer who has any sort of experience on web testing automation, I believe you have somehow heard about Selenium or Selenium IDE. So just to clear up, there is basically two types of web automation testing tools, code-based and codeless. So Selenium is a code-based framework that allows you to write your testing scripts in different programming languages like C#, Java, Python, and PHP. And the codeless tools, on the other hand, is the Selenium IDE, the blue icon, as you can see on the right. And these codeless tools, they usually record your actions on the website and then generate your test scripts. And it has been really a growing trend to use these captcha-based automation tools to create test scripts, since it takes less effort and time. And it also has a lower barrier of entry. So you don't need to necessarily hire programmers to do all these testings. And apart from Selenium IDE, there are many captcha-based tools on the market, such as the Catalog Recorder, Test Complete, and CDEX. And so this talk is going to be focused on the problems that we face while using these captcha-based automation tools, the ones that you see on the right. Well, so anyways, I have read numerous articles on the internet that talks about the most common challenges that you will face when you use Selenium in your automation testing. And these articles usually covers up common issues that you will be seeing now on the slide, including the locator decay problem, the pop-up window problem, captcha problem, you name it. And some of these articles, they actually mention a workaround to these problems, which is pretty nice. But there are some other problems and challenges that you will eventually face when you are doing some web testing automations that no one has discussed before. And this is what I will be sharing with you today, the 8 challenges that I collected from my experience, which I couldn't see anywhere else on the internet. Well, so the first problem is called the MouseOver problem. So let's first take a look at a scenario where we need a MouseOver event. So on this slide, you can see there is a Google map, and this is a satellite image. And when you move your mouse over this satellite image, there is a pop-up menu that shows up, which allows you to change your map view. And so this is the MouseOver event that we want to capture or the mouse over event that we want to test. But why is mouse over event even a problem? So when you're recording a test case using a record-based tool, you eventually move your mouse over to the website and then do whatever you need to do. But if we set a listener for all the mouse over events on your website, you might see a lot of mouse over events popping up as you move your mouse through the website. Like you see right here on this side, you see a lot of mouse over in your script, and that's not what we want. So what should we do? It is actually a very challenging problem for these tools to develop algorithm to optimize the decision of which movements are the mouse moving around the website and which movements are actually intended for the testing step. So if you are struggling with this problem, one of the solutions would be to add the mouse over command by hand. And of course, that's one way to do it, but you would end up doing a lot of steps by hand instead of actually taking the advantage of capture-based tools and then recording it. So the other solution to this problem is by choosing a tool that can allow you to change the level of mouse over sensitivity. So that means that with a higher level of mouse sensitivity, you will be recording more mouse over events. And with a lower level of sensitivity, you will be recording less mouse over events. So you can kind of switch up the level of mouse over sensitivity and to see which level suits your website best. All right, now let's move on to the second problem. The second problem is called the visibility problem. This problem kind of happens generally in web testing automation, regardless to whether it is code-based tool or a codeless tool. So what is a visibility problem? Let's look at an example. In this website, although it's everything in Chinese, but you can see that this is a form and we have a button here that is the button to continue to submit the form. And right here, the orange button is the button for customer service. So as you can see here in the next screenshot, after completing the form, this customer service button actually covers up the button for you to continue your form. So for the users, this button is not clickable. But for a web automation testing tool, since it needs to trigger the click at command to the button, as long as the button is present in the DOM tree, whether or not it's covered or invisible or disabled, the button click is going to be triggered. But for testing this website, we want to make sure that this website works for the real users. So the way we want to test this website is to make sure that the real users can use it and not only the machine. So you might be thinking that why don't we just compare the XY coordinates of the elements on the website and see if they are overlapping? Well, it will work for the previous case, but we can take a look at the next example. In this Google search result page, everything looks fine, right? But if we take a look at the DOM tree, you can see that the div of this search result is actually overlapping with this column on the right. So for the real users, they think that this website is okay because if nothing is overlapping. But if we only look at the XY coordinates of the elements, the machine would think that this div is covering up the other div. So the real challenge here is how can we simulate the way humans perceive the element as visible or not? So that means that a website that is machine-proof does not necessarily mean that it is human-proof. So there are many automation tools that develop their own algorithms to verify the visibility of the element that is most likely to simulate a human's perspective. And these commands have different names in different tools, like in Selenium IDE, it's called verify visible. And there's also opposite to this command, which is called verify not visible, where you can verify if this element is indeed not visible to the users. And when you execute this command, the command will pass if the algorithm thinks that this element is visible to the users, and it will fail if the algorithm thinks that this is not visible to the users. And well, let's move on to the third problem. The third problem is called, I called it the clickable disabled button. So this is kind of a variation to the previous problem. So we mentioned that in automation tools, they can still kind of trigger a button click on the website in spite of the element being covered by the other element. So the same concept can be applied to this problem, where automation tools can kind of still trigger the button click if the button is disabled or invisible, as long as it is present in the DOM tree. So there are two main ways to disable a button. So the first way is by using the HTML attribute, and the other one is by using the CSS attribute. So by using an HTML attribute, you turn the disabled attribute to disabled, and by using the CSS attribute, you set the pointer events attribute to none. This is mainly the two ways that you can disable a button. So again, as a professional tester or professional QA, we want to verify that the button is indeed disabled and unclickable for the real users. So the way I approach this problem is to first look at the source code of the website to see exactly which method of the website they use to disable the problem, whether it's by HTML or by CSS. So if the website uses the HTML attribute, then we can store this element first as an object, and then we can log its attribute. So right here, you can see that I saved this element as my element, and then I can echo its attribute, the disabled attribute, to see that if this button is indeed disabled. And if the website uses the CSS attribute to disable a button, you can get the computed CSS style of the target element and evaluate if the pointer events are set to none. As you can see here, this is the code that you need to put in the run script command. And if the result is none, then the button is indeed disabled. But if you're not really into writing that much code, or this code just gets you nervous, you can try another command, which is called verify CSS. And this command will verify if some given CSS property is indeed applied to your element. And there, now you can verify that your button is indeed disabled. And now let's move on to the fourth problem, which is called the blur problem. And this has to do with the SendKeys command. The SendKeys command is a command used to trigger keyboard events, whether it's to input some string or to trigger the enter key or the arrow keys. And this SendKey command usually comes in handy when we are working with forms, like you see here in a Google form example. The SendKey command can automatically fill in this input field, and then when we press enter, the form will be submitted. But we have found that in some cases, like in this website called ServiceNow, where you can see that I used the SendKey command to fill in the form, but when I click on submit, the form detects this field as empty. Like it ignores my SendKey input. So after many observations, we found out that in some cases, like in this website, the SendKey command needs to be followed by a blur command that lets the element to get out of focus. And by getting out of focus, I mean that when you click on the input box, like the Google Form input box, you get this purple line under it, meaning that you are currently on this input and you are focused on this input. And when you click away or click on the next question, your input, the purple line disappears, meaning that this input is out of focus. And this is the event that we need to follow the SendKey command in order for this SendKey to work correctly. And now you can see after I insert the blur command, the SendKey command will work normally and I can continue with my form correctly. And also you could even use this blur command to test if some effect is taking place when you unfocus or focus on your website element like this Google Form input box changing color. And well, let's move on to the next. Next up, we have the confusion between SendKeys and EditContent. So if you have used Selenium before, you may notice that there are several commands that shows up when you are working with input fields. So recall that the SendKey command is used for triggering keyboard events, like to insert some string or to trigger the arrow key or the enter key on your website. And there is a similar command that is called EditContent, and it's usually confused with the SendKey command because this command also triggers an input on your element, but the difference is that EditContent alters the inner HTML of the element instead of sending the key event key by key. So let's this is the Tchart where I listed the key difference between these two commands. And you can see right here in an example. So in a search engine, you usually want to test if your recommendation list pops up. So as you can see in this Google search, there is a recommendation list when you enter some keywords. And when you're using the SendKey command, you can see that during the replay, the key down, when the user is pressing the arrow key down, it is actually recorded and replayed in this test case. But on the other hand, we have the EditContent command. And this execution will directly change the inner HTML of the element. And you can also see that the value for this command is actually a block of HTML code. So to summarize, SendKey can be used to simulate the keyboard event, which is a little bit more closer to a user's behavior, while EditContent directly changes the inner HTML of an element, which makes the execution easier and faster. So next time you are choosing between these two commands, you can consider these aspects. And now the next section is called page object model. So what is a page object model? So for programmers, we all know that an object-oriented programming design is a very important concept in programming because it allows you to reuse the code, either it's written by yourself or by somebody else. So the key here is to reuse the code. And some of the benefits of reusing the code is to avoid duplicated code and to have a better maintenance. So if you have the same piece of code in several places, you don't need to update each of them if you are modifying some function. So the same concept applies here for test cases. So let's look at a diagram. So if you have your website where all of your operation needs to start with a login case. So for captcha-based tools, it is harder to implement the object-oriented model. So you would start with logging in all of your test cases. But if suddenly the RD or the website manager tells you that they want to change one of the input fields for the login page, and now you have to change all of your login cases. So for a code-based tool, it is easier to implement the object-oriented design or to wrap the login step as an independent test case, and then call the login case at the beginning of the other test cases. So when you are updating the login step, it would be easier to maintain since you only need to maintain one of the cases. But on the other hand, we have the codeless tools. And to achieve object-oriented design, there is still a way we can achieve this, and it is achieved by using a command called run in Selenium IDE, which allows you to run another test case within a test case. And this command may be called in different names in other tools. So this is the way that we can still achieve object-oriented design in codeless tools, which people don't usually notice or people don't usually think it is possible in codeless tools. Well, now let's move on to the next topic. This is called getting more out of elements. So what do I mean by getting more out of elements? So I think that one of the most important part of the testing process is to verify if the displayed output is correct. Like this title on the website, whether it's like the big title or all these small titles of the video. We want to see if this displayed output is correct. And to do this, we will use the assert and verify commands in Selenium IDE, and as they are listed right here. So you can assert the element, text, title, or the value, like you see on this list. But throughout the years, we have received some requests demanding that they want to verify some attributes other than the ones listed here, because those elements listed there are actually a little bit limited, and for the purpose of your website, we don't know what attributes exactly you want to test. So there is a new command that we called store element, and this command can store the element object as a variable, and then we can make verifications to the element by logging its attributes in the console. Like we can see its height or width, and also I can write some if else statements to make it more like a verification case. Like in this case, I can see if this element is hidden, and I can do some handling in right here, or I just want to see if it's hidden or not. And there is also a variation to this command called store elements with a plural. And this command actually can store all of the elements on the website that corresponds to a locator. Like in this example, I store all of the H4 titles as my titles, and this command will store every H4 titles shown here as an array. And then in order to get them out one by one, we can use a while loop right here, and to log all of its, maybe its title one by one. So I don't have to actually verify them one by one, as you would if you are simply using a codeless tool. And this command would most likely to come in handy if you have a lot of elements on your website, where it's just not practical to verify each element one by one. And all right, last but not least, we have the viewport size versus window size problem. So first, let's define what are viewport size and window size. So window size is what you normally perceive as the size of the whole browser window. As you can see right here, it's the whole browser window. But on the other hand, we have the viewport size, which is the size of the viewport without any of the tabs up here, or the bookmark tab, or the address bar and all these buttons. It's only the content of the website. And in Selenium IDE, you could set the window size at the beginning of the test case if you want to set, if you want to test your website in different ratios. However, there is no command to set a specific viewport size in Selenium IDE. But why does this matter after all? So as you know, cross-browser testing is a very important type of testing to ensure that the same website can function correctly on different browsers. And every browser can be slightly different in their layout of the tabs or address bar or whatever that is outside of the viewport. So one of the most noticeable example is the Opera browser. The Opera browser, as you can see right here, it has a little tab, this toolbar on the left. So this would make the ratio of the viewport completely different from a Chrome browser that has the same window size. And this difference can affect the website that implements RWD, or responsive website design, where the website can appear in another layout when the size or ratio is different. Like we can see a different layout of the Google website when we are using a laptop, a tablet, or a mobile device. So it is very important to keep in mind that window size and viewport size are different when it comes to testing. And apart from affecting the RWD testing in different browsers, the viewport size can be extremely important when it comes to visual testing. So visual testing in general terms, it just means to test the website based on its visual properties. It may be done by verifying its CSS or the text displayed on the element. But in some ongoing studies, people are actually starting to combine the image recognition technologies into visual testing area, trying to use these image recognition technologies to determine if any abnormalities is showing up in your website in terms of visual aspects. And in this case, the image size must be identical, or else the image recognition may not have a decent result since the image size is different. Therefore, it is very important to keep in mind that the window size is actually different from the viewport size. And well, those were the 8 web testing automation challenges that you probably never seen on the internet. And I hope this test will become helpful in the future when you're performing any type of web testing automation, whether you are using a code-based or a codeless tool. And thank you so much again for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Melody. It was very insightful. Thank you for your time. Let me check the chat feed if there is any comments or questions. It was very insightful and very clear. You made your points. It was very, very nice, your session. I would like to thank you again for joining us and for sharing your knowledge and for visiting our virtual stage from Taiwan. Thank you again very much. There is a comment from Eduardo and from Córdoba also. Thank you for your session. We also have Cesar from Colombia that's saying hi, and also Fiorella. Hi. So thank you very much, Melody. It was very nice to meet you virtually, and hope sometime you can join us in person in Uruguay. Thank you all for joining us also today, and hope to see you in the next session. Thank you very much, Melody. Take care. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.